And so one of the things we've talked about is this idea of character and competence. And competence is what you see above the surface. It's the, it's the tree in this case, but it's the behaviors that you see and understand as you watch someone live their life. You see their competence. What we don't often see, but is reflected in competence, is the root system, and that's the character elements. What is it at their very foundation that makes us successful as we practice competence? And so the 10 principles, 5 of them are character principles and 5 are competence principles. So I want to run through those just quickly. This is the free preview of the book. And so character principles, the first one is, and I've called them all power principles, and thus the title Power Dance. So the first is the power of responsibility. And that is that we act responsibly as individuals and we teach our children to be responsible. So for example, we emphasize choice and accountability, that when you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other. And that we allow natural consequences to occur. Don't protect our children from the consequences of their choices. Now obviously, you don't let children run out into the middle of the street, and sometimes natural consequences are not tolerable. But in most cases, we hope that children learn from their experiences that there are consequences to our choices. The second character principle that I talk about in the book is what I call the power of your word. This is, what I say is what I am. And when I make a promise, I keep it. The law of the harvest, is kind of an eternal principle, one that exists and was taught in the Bible, that which we sow will we also reap. And we can't short-circuit that process. You can't plant peas and expect to harvest potatoes. And so it's about keeping our word, and the emotional bank account, which is a Stephen Covey principle, for those of you who enjoyed Dr. Covey as much as I did. And this concept that every one of us has an emotional bank account with each other. And when we make deposits, we make those by keeping promises. And when we need to make a withdrawal, we have to move quickly and do something that might tend to violate trust. The more deposits we've made, the more credit we get in that process. And so the power of your word is really about kind of those two key elements. The third one is what I call the power of the golden sword. And years ago, when my children were really young, I read an article by an author named Gary Smalley that was called The Two Swords of Power. And in this case, Smalley talked about and used the analogy of a silver sword and a golden sword. He said the silver sword is the sword of positional power. It's the one we carry at work. So when I look at Gene Nelson, I say, Gene, I don't care what you think, just go do this. That's positional power, right? Because he knows that I have control over things he likes to have happen to him. That doesn't always work at home. And in fact, you drain the emotional bank account when you utilize positional power. Sometimes you have to, but you make withdrawals from the emotional bank account when that happens. And so the golden sword is the idea of personal power, and that is the power you generate by the force of your personal character. And so as you make and keep promises, as you demonstrate respect, all of those things help you exercise personal power as opposed to positional power. So we talked about the principle of the golden sword. Next is the characters, the power of respect. Talked a little bit about that. It's the idea that we model respect, we listen actively. Julie reminds me frequently as she's talking to me, and if I'm involved in something else, she'll look at me and say, wah, 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 wah. In other words, I haven't been actively listening. And so we recognize that it's the importance of listening with feedback and having the opportunity to mirror back what people are telling us to ensure that we're listening. And then kind of walking the mile in someone else's shoes. The idea of trying to put ourselves in the place of others and understand what's happening in their world. Next, the fifth one is the power of character. This is one where we walk the walk, walk the talk. We do exactly what we say we're going to do. We capitalize on teaching moments. We're always looking for opportunities to teach and to and just be engaged at that level. And then finally, that we're consistent and predictable. One of the things lots of fathers write me about is this idea of the challenge of being consistent. And children need to know where we stand on things.